Hi.
Hello, how are you doing today? We are going to be having a lot of fun. And when I say fun, I mean fun. So today we are going to be reading the Bible as always. Then we're going to be doing the synopsis. Then we are going to be reading Dragon
Singer.
Chapter 2. Chapter 2, yeah.
Is Kimmy doing the synopsis?
Yeah,
She
we're
said
doing
yeah.
the synopsis.
Okay. All right, you ready? All right, so this is Daniel chapter 5. Sorry, we read 5 yesterday. Daniel chapter 6, which is possibly the most well-known story in the book of Daniel. Hi. Okay. So, as you recall yesterday in the exciting conclusion of that tale, Belshazzar's kingdom was overrun, and Darius the Mede became the king, and he was 62 years old. So this is Daniel chapter 6. This is the English Standard Version of the Bible, and here we go. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, "We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever." All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors, are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and injunction. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house, where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. They caught it all on a video on their cell phones. Oh, sorry, that's not in the story. Hi, Becca. Okay, I need to find my place again. I'm glad you're listening, Kimmy. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. JJ, that wasn't funny. These men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, "O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions?" The king answered and said, "The thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked." Then they answered and said before the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed, and set his mind to deliver Daniel, and he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king, and said to the king, Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians, that no injunction or ordinance the king establishes can be changed. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Then at break of day the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm. Then the king was exceedingly glad, and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. That is the end of chapter 6. So there we go. Are we doing the synopsis? All righty.
Half a scoop of each bit.
So I hope y'all are enjoying the Bible time that we have.
Quickly, please.
I am going to go now so that Kimmy can take over.
We have a special guest today, Monster or Twilight. So what happened in the last few chapters was Melanie, she got accustomed to, I keep calling her Melanie. Okay. So Melanie, she got to the Harper Hall, and basically she had her first night, and everybody accepted her, and they were all super nice, and they were very impressed by her 9 fire lizards. And also they showed them some of her songs, and they all really liked them. And that was about it, right, Mom? She also got put in another hospital for her feet.
No, not a hospital.
Well, she's
Just doctored.
yeah, she's being doctored.
My bookmark got taken away. See where it is. This is my fancy bookmark. All right. I'm waiting for Daniel to get back up here because he went to go feed the dogs. So just a minute. Kimmy and JJ, can you hear me okay? All right, I need you both to settle down, please. They're having a little sleepover tonight. So somebody asked me a question. Hurry up, Daniel. He's working on it. So Ben's in Denton. Ben and JJ share a room. And today I ransacked it. Well, I cleaned it. So I got to clean that with JJ while we listened to the last chapter of Anne of Green Gables, which was so cool. So we listened to the last chapter, and yeah, thumbs up. We're going to be starting Anne of Avonlea. Probably it was great. We'll probably start Anne of Avonlea on Saturday on our drive. We have a drive.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if we're having a live stream tomorrow night or not.
Hi, Bear.
Here, let me scroll down and see if somebody has like said anything because I never look at it till the end.
This is a video.
An avid book reader uses anything as a bookmark. Yes, yes. How is Ben doing? He's doing great in Denton right now. Living the life. I think tomorrow's Friday, right? Jessica, here, I'll like that. Jessica is going to be back in Denton tomorrow, and he's coming back here on the 30th. So, yeah, we love Anne of Green Gables too. And we were hoping to watch the movie like after we finish this book, but since we won't be in town, and plus I don't own it. I had it on VHS, but we don't have a VHS player anymore. So Daniel, hurry! He's probably raiding the pantry right now for goodies. JJ, Granny Bear says hi. Ah, he has arrived. Not you, the other one.
Oh.
Say hello. I love your shirt. You want to show us your creation?
I made this, like, it took me like 2 days. It was kind of hard. I got through it and coated it in tape. I'm still working
In the
on it,
process.
but yeah.
Pretty cool. All right, go settle down, please.
Okay.
In your
Thank you.
bedroom. Kimmy and JJ, I need you to settle down too, all right? Everybody settled? All right, and now we begin. Dragon Singer Chapter 2. Harper, tell me of the road that leads beyond this hold, that wends its way beyond the hill. Does it go further on until it ends in sunset's gold? Mentally roused briefly, reacting to an inner call that had nothing to do with the sun's rising on this side of Pern. She saw dark night and stars through the window, felt the sleeping fire lizards tucked around her, and gratefully went back to sleep again. She was so tired. Once the sun had cleared the roof of the outer side of the rectangle of buildings that comprised the main Harper Craft Hall, it shone directly at her windows, set in the eastern side of the hall. Gradually, the light penetrated the room, and the unusual combination of light and warmth on her face woke Mentally. She lay, her body not yet responsive, wondering where she was, remembering she was uncertain what to do next. Had she missed some general waking call? No, Sylvina had said that she was to sleep herself out. As she pushed back the sleeping furs, she heard the sound of voices chanting. The rhythm was familiar. She smiled, identifying one of the long sagas. Apprentices were being taught the complicated timing by rote, just as she had taught the youngsters at Half Circle Seahold when Petrion was sick, and later after he died. The similarity reassured her. As she slid from the bed, she clenched her teeth in anticipation of touching the cool, hard stones of the floor, but to her surprise, her feet only felt stiff, not painful this morning. She glanced out the window at the sun. It was well into morning. By the cast of shadow, she'd really slept. Then she laughed at herself, for, to be sure, she had. She was halfway round Pern from Bend and Weir and Half Circle Hold, and she had had at least 6 hours more rest than usual. Fortunately, the fire lizards had been as tired as she, or they'd have waked her with their hunger. She stretched and shook out her hair, then hobbled carefully to the jar and basin. After washing with soap sand, she dressed and brushed her hair, feeling able to face new experiences. Beauty gave an impatient chirp. She was awake and very hungry. Rocky and Diver echoed the complaint. Mentally would have to find them food, and right soon. Having 9 fire lizards would prejudice enough people against her without having unimaginably hungry ones who would irritate even the most tolerant of people. And hungry children, no joke. Resolutely, Mentally opened the door to a silent hallway. The aromatic odors of claw, baking breads, and meats filled the air. Mentally decided she needed only follow the smells to their source to satisfy her friends. On either side of the wide corridor were doors. Those on the outside of the hall were open to let sun and air flood the inside. She descended from the uppermost level into the large entranceway. Directly in front of the staircase were dragon-high metal doors and the most curious closings she'd ever seen. On the back of the doors were wheels, which evidently turned the heavy bars into floor and ceiling. At Half Circle Sea-Hold, there had been the heavy horizontal bars, but this arrangement would be easier to lock and looked much more secure. To the left was a double-doored entrance into the great hall, probably the room where the Harper had been talking last night. To the right, she looked into the dining hall, almost as large as the great hall, with 3 long tables parallel to the windows. Also to her right, by the stairwell, was an open doorway leading to shallow steps in the kitchen, judging by the appetizing odors and familiar sounds. The fire lizards creeled in hunger, but Mentally couldn't have the whole fair invading the kitchen and upsetting the drudges. She ordered them to perch on the cornices in the shadows above the door. She'd bring them food, she promised them, but they had to behave. Beauty scolded until the others settled meekly into place, only their glowing, jewel-faceted eyes giving evidence of their positions. Then Beauty assumed her favorite perch on Menelly's shoulder, her head half buried in Menelly's thick hair, and her tail wrapped securely about Menelly's throat like a golden necklace. As Menelly reached the kitchen, the scene with the drudges and cooks scurrying about, preparing the midday meal, fleetingly revived memories of happier days at Half Circle. But here it was Sylvina who noticed her and smiled, as Menelly's mother would not have done. "You're awake. Are you rested?" Sylvina gestured imperatively. Imperatively. Um, imperatively, there's an A in there. Imperatively at a slack-featured, clumsy-looking man by the hearth. "Claw, Camo! Pour a mug of claw for Menelly. You must be famished, child. How are your feet?" "Fine, thank you, and I don't want to bother anyone." "Bother? What bother? Camo, pour the claw into the mug." It's not for myself I'm here." "Well, you need to eat, and you must be famished." "Please, it's my fire lizards. Have you any scraps?" Sylvina's hands flew to her mouth. She glanced about her head as if expecting a swarm of fire lizards. "No, I've told them to wait," Mentally said quickly. "They won't come in here." "Now, you are a thoughtful child," Sylvina said in so firm a tone that Mentally wondered why, and then realized that she was the object of a good deal of furtive curiosity. "Camo, here, give me that." Sylvina took the cup from the man, who was walking with exaggerated care not to slop an overfull container. "And get the big blue bowl from the cold room. The big blue bowl, Camo, from the cold room. Bring it to me." Sylvina deftly handed the cup to Menelly without spilling a drop. "The cold room, Camo, and the blue bowl." She turned the man by the shoulders and gave him a gentle shove in the proper direction. "Abuna, you're nearest the hearth. Do dish up some of the cereal. Plenty of sweetening on it, too. The child's nothing but skin and bones." Sylvina smiled at Menelly. "No use feeding the fowl and starving the servant, as it were. I saved meat for your friends when we trussed up the roast." And Sylvana nodded towards the biggest hearth where great joints of meat were turning on heavy spits. Since meat's what the Harper and fire lizards need. Now, where would be the best place? Sylvina glanced about her undecidedly, but Menelly had noticed a low door that led up a short flight of steps to the corner of the courtyard. "Would I disturb anyone out there?" "Not at all. You are a considerate child. That's right. Camo!" And thank you. Sylvana patted the half-wit's arm kindly while he beamed with the pleasure of a job properly done and rewarded. Sylvina tipped the edge of the bowl towards Menely. Is this enough? There's more. Oh, that's a gracious plenty, Sylvina. Camo, this is Menely. Follow Menely with the bowl. She can't carry it and her own breakfast. This is Menely, Camo. Follow Menely. Go right out, dear. Camo's good at carrying things, at least what doesn't spill. Sylvina turned from her then, speaking sharply to two women chopping roots, biting them to slice, not stare, very much aware of scrutiny. Mentally moved awkwardly to the steps, cup in one hand, bowl of warm cereal in the other, and Camo shuffling behind her. Beauty, who had remained discreetly covered by Menelly's hair, now craned her neck about, smelling the raw meat in the bowl Camo carried. Pretty, pretty, the man mumbled as he noticed the fire lizard. Pretty small dragon? He tapped Menelly on the shoulder. Pretty small dragon? He was so anxious for her answer that he almost tripped on the shallow steps. Yes, she is like a small dragon, and she is pretty, Menelly agreed, smiling. Her name is Beauty. Her name is Beauty. Camo was entranced. Her name is Beauty. She pretty small dragon. He beamed as he loudly declared this information. Menely shushed him, not wanting either to alarm or distract Sylvina's helpers. She put down her mug and bowl and reached for the meat. Pretty small dragon Beauty, Camo said, ignoring her as he pulled the bowl so firmly clutched in his huge, thick-fingered hands. You go to Sylvina, Camo. You go to Sylvina. Camo stood where he was, bobbing his head up and down, his mouth set in a wet, wide grimace of childish delight, too entranced by Beauty to be distracted. Beauty now creeled imperiously and mentally grabbed a handful of meat to quiet her, but her cries had alerted the others. They came, some of them from the open windows of the dining hall above Menelly's head, others, judging by shrieks of dismay, through the kitchen and out the door by the steps. Pretty, pretty, all pretty, Camo explained, turning his head from side to side, trying to see all the flitting fire lizards at once. He didn't move a muscle as Auntie 1 and 2 perched on his forearms, snatching goblets of meat directly from the bowl. Uncle secured his talons on the fabric of Camo's tunic, his right wingtip jabbing the man in the neck and chin as the littlest fire lizard fought for his fair share of the meat. Brownie, Mimic, and Lazybones ranged from Camo's shoulders to Menelly's as she tried to distribute the meat evenly. Alternating between embarrassment at her friend's bad manners and the gratitude for Camo's stolid assistance, Menelly was acutely aware that all activity had ceased in the kitchen to watch the spectacle. Momentarily, she expected to hear an irate Sylvina order Camo back to his ordinary duties, but all she heard was the buzz of whispered gossip. How many does she have? She heard one clear whisper out of a general mumble. 9, Sylvina answered imperturbably. When the Harper was given have hatched, the Harper Hall will have 11. Sylvina sounded smugly superior. The buzz increased in volume. That bread's risen enough now, Abuna. You and Kaylee shape it. The fire lizards had cleared the bowl of meat, and Camo stared into its hollow, his face contorted by an expression of dismay. All gone? Pretty's hungry? No, Camo. They've had more than enough. They're not hungry any more. In fact, their bellies were distended, they're gorged so. You go to Sylvina. Sylvina wants you, Camo. And mentally followed Sylvina's example. She took him by the shoulders, turned him down the steps, and gave him a gentle shove. Mentally sipped the good hot claw, beginning to think that Sylvina's marked attentions and kindness were deliberate. Oh, or was that foolish? Sylvina was just a kind, thoughtful person. Look how she treated dull-witted Camo. She was patience herself with his inadequacy. Nonetheless, Sylvina was obviously the head woman at the Harpercraft Hall and, like Serene Minora at Benton Weir, undoubtedly wielded a good deal of authority. If Sylvina was friendly, others would follow her lead. Mentally began to relax in the warm sun. Her dreams last night had been troubled, though she couldn't remember details now in the bright morning, only a sense of uneasiness and helplessness. Sylvina had done much to dissipate the lingering misgivings. Nothing to fear from Harper's, Gillen had repeatedly told her. Across the courtyard, young voices broke into a lusty rendition of the saga previously chanted. The fire lizards rose at the eruption of sound, setting against settling again as Meneley laughingly reassured them. Then a pure, sweet trill from Beauty soared in delicate descant above the apprentices' male voices. Rocky and Diver joined her, wings half spread as they expanded their lungs for breath. Mimic and Brownie dropped from the window ledge to add to their voices. Lazy would not put himself to any such effort, and the two aunties and Blue Uncle were all best indifferent singers. But they listened, heads cocked, jeweled eyes whirling. The five singers rose to their haunches now, their throats thickening, their cheeks swelling as their jaws relaxed to emit the sweet, pure notes. Their eyes were half lidded as they concentrated, as good singers will, to produce the fluting descant. They were happy then, Meneley thought with relief, and picked up the melody of the saga. Not that the fire lizards needed her voice, with the apprentices supplying the tune and harmony. They were on the last two measures of the chorus when Meneley suddenly realized that it was only herself and the fire lizards singing, that the male voices had ceased. Startled, she looked up and saw that almost every window about the courtyard was filled with faces. The exceptions were the windows of the hall from which the voices had come. "Who's been singing?" demanded an irate tenor, and a man's head appeared at one of the empty windows. "Why, that's a grand way to wake up, Brutigan," said the clear baritone of the master harper, from some point above Meneley and to her left. Craning her head up, she saw him leaning out of his window on the upper story. "Good morning to you, Master Harper," said Brutigan courteously, but his tone indicated that he was disgruntled by the intervention. Meneley tried to sit small, heartily wishing herself between. She was certainly frozen motionless. "I didn't know your fire lizards could sing," Sylvina said, appearing on Meneley's right and absently retrieving mug and bowl from the steps. "A nice compliment to your chorus, eh, Brutigan?" she added, raising her voice to carry across the courtyard. "You'd be wanting your claw now, Robinson?" "It would be welcome, Sylvina." He stretched, leaned further out to peer down at Meneley. "Enter a fair of fire lizards singing. A lovely way to be awakened, Meneley, and a good morning to you, too." Before Meneley could respond, a look of dismay crossed her face. "My fire lizard, my egg!" and he disappeared from sight. Sylvina chuckled, and she regarded Meneley. "He'll be of no use to anyone until it's hatched and he's got one of his own." At that point, Brutigan's singers renewed their song. Beauty chirruped questioningly at Meneley. "No, no, Beauty, no more singing, not now. They need the practice," and Sylvina gestured at the hall. "Now I've the harper's meal to see to, and you to settle." She paused, glancing about at the fire lizards. "But what to do with them? They usually sleep when they're as full as they are right now. All to the good. But where? Mercy!" Meneley tried not to laugh at Sylvina's astonishment because all but Beauty, who took her usual perch on Meneley's shoulder, had disappeared. Meneley pointed to the roof opposite and the small bodies landing there apparently out of thin air. "They do go between, don't they?" Sylvina said more than asked. "Harper says they're much like dragons." That was a question. "I don't know that much about dragons, but fire lizards can go between. They followed me last night from Bendon Weir." "And they're obedient." "I could wish the apprentices were half so willing." Then Sylvina motioned Meneley to follow her back into the kitchen. "Commode, turn the spit. Commode, now turn the spit. I suppose the rest of you have been watching the yard instead of the food," she said, scowling indiscriminately about the kitchen. The cooks and the drudges alike pretended industry, clanging, banging, splashing, or bending with assiduous care over quieter tasks of paring and scraping. "Better yet, Meneley, you take the harper his claw and check that egg of his. He'll be roaring for you soon enough, so we might as well anticipate. Then I shall want Master Oldive to see your feet, and not that Minora hasn't all but healed them anyway. And Sylvina caught Meneley's left hand and scowled at the red mark. "Wherever did you get such a fierce wound, and who bungled the healing of it? There now, you can grip with that hand." Sylvina had been assembling on a small tray the various items of the harper's breakfast, the last of which was a heavy pot of cloth. Now she gave the tray to Meneley. "There now, his room is the second door on the right from yours, Meneley. Turn the spit, Camo. Don't just hold on to it. Meneley's fire lizards are fed and sleeping. You'll have another gawk at them later. Turn the spit now." As briskly as Meneley could move on her stiff feet, She made her way out of the kitchen and up the broad steps to the second level. Beauty hummed softly in her ear a gentle, disobedient descant to the saga that Brudigen's pupils were singing lustily. Master Robinson hadn't sounded annoyed about the fire lizard singing, mentally thought. She'd apologized to Journeyman Brudigen when she got the chance. She simply hadn't realized she'd caused a distraction. She'd been so pleased that her friends were relaxed enough to want to sing. Second door on her right, mentally tapped. Then rapped. Then knocked, hard enough to make her knuckles sting. Come, come, and Sylvina. Oh, Manily, you're just the person I wanted to see, the harper said, throwing open the door. And good morning to you, proud beauty, he added, grinning at the little queen who chirped in acknowledgement as he took the tray from Manily. Sylvina's forever anticipating me. Would you please check my egg? It's in the other room by the hearth. It feels harder to me. He sounded anxious as he pointed to the farther door. Manily obediently entered the room, and he walked with her, setting the tray down as he passed the sand table by the window and pouring himself a mug of claw before he joined her by the hearth and in the next room, where a small fire burned gently. the earthen pot had been set at the edge of the hearth apron. Manily opened it carefully, brushing aside the warm sand that covered the precious fire lizard egg. It was harder, but not much more so than when she had given it to the Master Harper of Bendon Weir the previous evening. It's fine, Master Robinson, just fine. And the pot is warm enough, too, she said, running her hands down the sides. She replaced the sand and the top and rose. When she brought the clutch back to Bendon Weir 2 days ago, Weirwoman Lessa said it would take a 7-day for them to hatch, so we've 5 days more. The harper sighed with exaggerated relief. You slept well, Manily? You rested? Awake long? Long enough. The harper burst out laughing as she realized how much chagrin she'd put into her tone. Sorry. Long enough to set a few people by the ears, huh? My dear child, did you not notice the difference in the chorus the second time? Your fire lizards have challenged them. Brudigen was only gruff with surprise. Tell me, can your fire lizards improvise descants to any tune? I don't really know, Master Robinson. Still not sure, are you, young Manily? He didn't mean the fire lizard's abilities. There was such kindness in his voice and eyes that Manily felt unexpected tears behind her eyes. I get tears in my ears all the time, though. They're all connected, so whatever. I don't want to be a nuisance. Allow me to differ both to statement and content, Manily. Then he sighed. You're over young to appreciate the value of nuisance, although the improvement in that chorus is a point in my argument. However, it's much too early in the morning for me to expound philosophy. He guided her back into the other room, quite the most cluttered place she had ever seen, and in direct contrast to the neatness of his bedchamber. While musical instruments were carefully stored on hook and shelf in cases, piles of record skins, drawings, slates, wax, and stone littered every surface and were heaped in corners and against the walls of the room. On one wall was a finely drawn map of the Pern continent, with smaller detailed drawings of all the major holds and craft halls pinned here and there on the borders. The long sand table by the window was covered with musical notations, some of them carefully shielded by glass to prevent erasure. The harper had set the tray on the center island, which separated the sand table into two halves. Now he pulled a square of wood to protect the sand and positioned the tray so he could eat comfortably. He smeared a thick slice of bread with soft cheese and picked up his spoon to eat his cereal, motioning with the spoon for Manily to seat herself on a stool. We're in a period of change and readjustment, Manily, he said, managing to speak and eat simultaneously without choking on food or garbling his words. And you are likely to be a vital part of that change. Yesterday, I exerted an unfair pressure on you to join the Harper Hall. Oh, yes, I did, but you belong here. His forefinger stabbed downward at the floor and then waggled out at the courtyard. First, and he paused to swallow claw, washing down bread and cereal, we must discover just how well Petrion taught you the fundamentals of our craft and what you need to further your gifts. And, he pointed now to his left hand, what can be done to correct that scar damage? I'd still like to hear you play the songs you wrote. His eyes fell to her hands in her lap, so that she was aware of her absent-minded kneading of her left palm. Master Oldive will set that right if anyone can. Sylvina said I was to see him today. We'll have you playing again, more than just those pipes. We need you. When you can craft songs like those Petrion sent me and the ones Elgian found stuck away in the back of the harbor's shelves in half circle. Yes, and that's a matter I'd like to better explain. He went on, smoothing the hair at the back of his neck, and to Meneley's amazement, appearing to be embarrassed. Explain? Yes, well, you hadn't obviously finished writing that song about the Fire Lizard Queen. No, I hadn't actually. Meneley felt that she was not hearing his words properly. For one thing, why did the Master Harper have to explain anything to her? And she'd only jotted down the little tune about the Fire Lizard Queen. Yet last night, now she remembered, and he'd mentioned the song, as if all the Harpers knew about it. You mean Harper Elgian sent it to you? How else would I have got it? We couldn't find you. Robinson sounded annoyed. When I think of you living in a cave with a damaged hand and you hadn't been allowed to finish that charming song. So I did. He got up, rummaged along the piles of wax slates under the window, extracted one, and handed it to her. She looked at the notations obediently, but although they were familiar, she couldn't make her mind read the melody. I had to have something about fire lizards, since I believe they're going to be far more important than anyone has yet realized. And this tune, his finger tapped the hard wax surface approvingly, was so exactly what I needed that I just brushed up the harmonies and compressed the lyric story. Probably what you'd have done yourself if you'd had the chance to work on it again. I couldn't really improve on the melodic line without destroying the integral charm of it. What's the matter, Meneley? Meneley realized that she'd been staring at him, unable to believe he was praising a silly tune she'd only scrawled down. Guiltily, she examined the slate again. I never did get a chance to play it. I wasn't supposed to play my own tunes in the Seahold. I promised my father I wouldn't, so you see, Meneley. Startled, she looked up at the stern tone. I want you to promise me, and you're now my apprentice. I want you to promise me to write down any tune that comes into your mind. I want you to play it as often as necessary to get it right. Do you understand me? That's why I brought you here. He tapped the slate again. That was a good song, even before I tampered with it. I need good songs badly. What I said about change affects the Harper Hall more than any other craft, Meneley, because we are the ones who affect change. Just as we teach with our songs, we also help people accept new ideas and necessary changes. And for that, we need a special kind of harpering. Now, I still have to consider craft principles and standards, especially in your unusual situation. The conventional procedure must be observed. Once we've dispensed with the formalities, we can proceed with your training as fast as you want to go. But this is where you belong, Meneley. You and your singing fire lizards. Bless me, but that was lovely to hear this morning. Ah, Sylvina, good morning to you as well, Master Oldive. Meneley knew it was impolite to stare at anyone and looked away as soon as she realized that she was staring. But Master Oldive required a long look. He was shorter than herself, but only because his head was awry on his neck. His great lean face tilted up from his permanent slant, and she was the impression of enormous dark eyes. She had the impression of enormous dark eyes under very shaggy brows, taking in every detail of herself. I'm sorry, Master Robinson, have we interrupted you? Sylvina paused on the threshold indecisively. Yes and no. I don't think I've convinced Meneley, but that will take time. Meanwhile, we'll get on with the basics. We'll speak again, Meneley, said the harper. Go along with Master Oldive now. Let him do his best or his worst for you. She must play again, Oldive. The harper's smile. The harper's smile as he gestured to Meneley to follow the man implied complete faith in his ability. And Sylvina, Meneley says the egg's safe enough for 4 or 5 days, but you'll please arrange to have someone. Why not Siebel? He's got his egg to check too, doesn't he? And with Meneley here at the hall, Sylvina was saying as Master Oldive ushered Meneley out of the room before him, closed the door. I'm to see to your feet as well, Sylvina tells me, was the man's comment as he indicated Meneley should lead the way to her room. The master's voice was unexpectedly deep, and while he might be shorter than herself in the torso, he'd as long a leg and arm and matched her stride down the corridor. As he pushed wider her door, She realized that his stature was due to terrible malformation of his spine. By my life, Oldave exclaimed, stopped abruptly as Meneley preceded him into the room. I thought for a moment you were as blighted as myself. It is a fire lizard on your shoulder, isn't it? He chuckled. Now there's one on me, so it is. Is the creature friendly? He peered up at Beauty, who chirped pleasantly back, since Oldave was patiently addressing her. Patently addressing her. As long as I'm friendly to your Meneley, I take it. You'll have to write another verse to your fire lizard song, proving the rewards of kindness, he added, gesturing her to sit on the window side of the bed as he pulled up a stool. Oh, that's not my song, she said, removing her slippers. Master Oldeye frowned. Not your song, but Master Robinson assigns it to you constantly. He rewrote it. He told me so. That's not unusual, and Master Oldeye dismissed her protest. Proper mess you made of your feet, he said, his voice taking on a distant, thoughtful quality as he looked at feet, first one, then the other foot. Running, I believe? Mentally felt reproved. I was caught out during Threadfall, you see, far from my cave, and I had to run. Ooh, sorry, did I hurt you? The flesh is very tender, and will remain that way a while longer. He began to smooth on a pungent-smelling substance, and she couldn't keep her foot still. He grabbed her ankle firmly to complete the medication, countering her embarrassed apology by remarking that her twitching proved that she'd done the nerves no harm with the pounding she'd given her feet. You're to keep off them as much as possible. I'll tell Selena so. And use this salve morning and night. Aids healing and keeps the skin from itching. He replaced Meneley's slippers. Now, this hand of yours. She hesitated, knowing that his opinion of the bungled wound was likely to echo Minora's and Sylvina's. Pervasively, she was afflicted by an obscure loyalty to her mother. Oldave regarded her steadily, as if divining some measure of her reluctance, and extended his own hand. Compelled by the very neutrality of his gaze, she gave him her injured hand. To her surprise, there was no change of expression on his face, no condemnation or pity, merely interest in the problem the thick scarred palm posed for a man of his skill. He prodded the scar tissue, murmuring thoughtfully in his throat, "Make a fist." She could just about do that, but when he asked her to extend her fingers, the scar pulled, and she tried to stretch the palm. Not as bad as I was led to believe. An infection, I suppose? Packtail slime. Yes, insidious stuff. He gave her hand another twist, but the scar is not long healed. Kimmy, can you grab my water bottle? Please, it's over here.
Okay.
But the scar is not long healed, and the tissue can still be stretched. A few more months, and we might not have been able to do anything to flex the hand. Now, you will do exercises, tightening your fingers about a small hard ball, which I will provide you. And extending the hand, he just demonstrated, forcing her fingers upwards and apart so that she cried out involuntarily. If you can discipline yourself to the point of actual discomfort, you are doing the exercise properly. We must stretch the tightened skin, the webbing between your fingers, and the stiffened tendons. I shall also provide a salve, which you are to rub well into the scar tissue to make it softer and more pliable. Conscientious effort on your part will determine the rate of progress. I suspect that you will be sufficiently motivated. Just a second. Okay, so I read this book in 7th grade. Daniel's in 7th grade right now. These words are huge, which is why I talk the way I do. Before Meneley could stammer her thanks, the astonished man was out of the hall and closing the door behind him. Beauty made a sound, half quizzical chirp, half approving burble. She'd come loose from Meneley's neck during the examination, watching the proceedings from a depression in the sleeping firs. Now she walked over to Meneley and stroked her head against Meneley's arm. From the apprentices' hall across the courtyard, the singing was renewed with vigor and volume. Beauty cocked her head, humming with delight, and then, when Meneley shushed her, looked wistfully up at the girl. I don't think we should sing again right just now, but they do sound grand, don't they? She sat there caressing Beauty, delighted in the music, very close harmony, she realized approvingly, the sort only trained voices and well-rehearsed singers can achieve. Sorry. Granny Bear says your helmet's cool. He said thanks. Well, said Sylvina, entering the room briskly, you have stirred them up. It's good to hear that old rooter sung with some spirit. Menely had no time to register astonishment at Sylvina's comment, for the head woman poked at Menely's bundle of things on the table and twitched the sleeping rug into neat folds. We might just as well get you settled in Dunca's cottage now, Sylvina continued. Furthermore, there's an outside room unoccupied. The head woman wrinkled her nose in a slightly disparaging grimace. Those Holder girls are impossible about being outside, but it oughtn't to worry you. She smiled at Menely. Old Ive says you're to keep off your feet, but some walking's got to be done. Still, you won't be in a chore section. Another good reason to keep you at Dunca's, I suppose. Sylvina frowned and then looked back at Menely's small bundle. This is all you brought with you? And 9 fire lizards. Sylvina laughed, an embarrassment of riches. She glanced out the window, peering across the courtyard to the far roof where the fire lizards were still sunning themselves. They do stay where they're told, don't they? Generally, but I'm not sure how good they are with too many people about or unusual noise. Or fascinating diversions. Sylvina smiled again at Menely as she nodded towards the windows and the music issuing from the apprentices' hall. They always sang along with me. I didn't realize we shouldn't. How should you? Not to worry, Menely. You'll fit in here just fine. Now let's wrap up your bundle and show you the way to Dunca's. Then Robinson wants you to borrow a guitar. Master Gerard is sure to have a spare usable one in the workshop. You'll have to make your own, you know, unless you made one for Petrion at the Seahold. I had none of my own. Menely was relieved that she could keep her voice steady, but Petrion took his with him. Surely you. I had the use of it, yes. Menely managed to keep her tone even as she rigidly suppressed. I tried to combine rigidly and suppressed. What time is it? Okay. She rigidly suppressed the memory of how she had lost the use of the beating her father had given her for forbidding tuning, playing her own songs. I made myself pipes, she added, diverting Sylvina from further questions. Rummaging in her bundle, she brought out the multiple pipes she had made in her cave by the sea. Reeds? And done with a belt knife by the look of them, said Sylvina, walking to the window for more light as she turned the pipes in a critical examination. Well done for just a belt knife. She returned the pipes to Menely with an approving expression. Petrion was a good teacher. Did you know him well? Menely felt a wave of grief at her loss of the only person in her home hold who had been interested in her. Indeed, I did. Sylvina gave Menely a frown. Did he not talk of the Harper Hall at all to you? No. Why should he? Why shouldn't he? He taught you, didn't he? He encouraged you to write. Sent Robinson those songs. Sylvina stared at Menely in real surprise for a long moment. Then she shrugged with a little laugh. Well, Petrion's always had his own reasons for everything she did, and no one was the wiser. But he was a good man. Menely nodded, unable for a moment to speak, berating herself for ever once doubting during those lonely, miserable days at Half Circle after Petrion's death that he'd done what he said he'd do, though the old Harper's mind had taken to wandering. Before I forget, Sylvina said, how often do your fire lizards need to be fed? They're hungriest in the morning, though they eat any time, but maybe that was because I had to hunt and catch food for them, and it took hours. The wild ones seem to have no trouble. Feed 'em once and they're always looking to you. Is that it? Sylvina smiled to soften an implied criticism. The cooks throw all the scraps into a big earthen jar in the cold room. Most of it goes to the watch wearers, but I'll give orders that you're to have whatever you require. I don't mean to be a bother. Sylvina gave such a look that Menely broke off her attempt to apologize. Be sure that when you do bother me, I'll inform you. Sylvina grinned. Just ask any of the apprentices if I won't. Sylvina had been leading Menely down the steps and out of the cliff hold of the Harper Hall as she talked. Now they passed under an arch that gave onto a broad road of paving stones, never a blade of grass or spot of moss to be seen anywhere. For the first time, Meneley had a chance to appreciate the size of Fort Hold, knowing that it was the oldest and largest hold that was quite different from seeing it being outside the towering cliff. Thousands of people must live in the cliff holds and cottages that hugged the rock palisades. Awed, Meneley's steps slowed as she stared at the wide ramp leading to the courtyard and main entrance of Fort Hold. Higher into the cliff face than the Harpercraft Hall, and with rows of windows extending upwards in sheer of stone almost to the fire heights themselves. In Half Circle Seahold, everyone had been in the cliff, but at Fort Hold, stone buildings had been built out of wings from the cliff, forming a quadrangle similar to the Harpercraft Hall. Smaller cottages had been added onto the original wings on either side of the ramp. There were dwellings bordering the sides of the broad paved road that led in several well-traveled directions, south to the fields and pastures, east down the valley towards the low footholds, and west around to the pass in a cliff that would lead to the higher mountains of the central Fort Range. Sylvina guided Meneley now towards a cottage, a good-sized one with 5 windows, all of them shuttered tight on the upper floor. The cottage nestled against the slope of the ramp. As they got close enough, Meneley realized that the little cot was also quite old, and the cottage door was metal too. Incredible! Sylvina opened it. Calling out for Dunca, Meneley had just time to notice that the metal door closed as the one in the Harper Hall did, with a small wheel throwing the thick rods into grooves in ceiling and floor. Meneley, come and meet Dunca, who holds the cottage for the girls who study at the Harper Hall. Meneley dutifully greeted the short, dumpy woman with bright black eyes and cheeks like a puff bell's sides. Dunca gave Meneley a raking look, at odds with her jolly appearance, as if measuring up Meneley to the gossip she'd already heard. Then Dunca saw Beauty peeking below Meneley's ear. She gave a shriek, jumping back. What's that? Meneley reached up to calm Beauty, who was hissing and raising her wings, getting one entangled in Meneley's hair. But Dunca, surely you knew, Sylvina's voice chided the woman, that Meneley had impressed fire lizards. Meneley's sharp ear caught the edge of Sylvina's voice, and so did the little queen, for Beauty thrummed softly and warningly in her throat as her eyes whirled at Dunca. Meneley silently called her to order. I heard, but I don't always credit things I'm told, said Dunca, standing as far away from Meneley and Beauty as the hall permitted. Very wise of you, replied Sylvina, the set of the head woman's lips and the wary amusement in her glance told Meneley that Sylvina was not overly fond of the little cot holder. Now you've a windowed room vacant, have you not? I think it's best if we settle her there. I don't want another hysterical girl who'll panic during threadfall and scare us all with imagining that Thread is actually in the cottage. Sylvina's eyes danced with suppressed laughter as she glanced Meneley's way. No, Meneley won't panic. She is, by the way, the youngest daughter of Seaholder Giannis of Half Circle Seahold, beholden to Bendon Weir. The sea breeds stern souls, you know. Dunca's bright eyes were almost lost in the folds of her eye flesh as she peered up at Meneley. So you knew Petrion, did you? Yes, I did, Dunca. The cot-holder gave a disgusted snort and turned so quickly her full skirt followed in hasty swirls as she made for the stone steps carved into the wall at the back of the hallway. She kept twitching her skirt, grunting at the steepness of the risers as she heaved her small fat person upwards. 2 narrow corridors, lit at either end by dimming glows, went left and right from the stairwell. Dunca turned right, led them to the far end, and threw open the last door of the outside. Lazy bums, she said translucently, fumbling at the catch of the glow basket. They've cleared the glows. Where are they kept? Asked Meneley, wishing to ingratiate herself with the cot keeper. Fleetingly, she wondered if she'd always be trotting up and down narrow steps after glows. Where's your drudge, Dunca? It's her task to bring glows, not Meneley's, and said Sylvina as she walked past Dunca and flipped open first one, then a second set of shutters, flooding the room with sunlight. Sylvina, what are you doing? Threadfall's not for 2 more days, Dunca. Be sensible. The room's fusty. Dunca's answer was a shriek as the other fire lizards swooped in through the opened window, diving about the room, chittering excitedly. There was nothing for them to cling to, since the walls were bare of hangings and the bed frame empty of rushes, the sleeping fur rolled up on the small press. The two green aunties and blue uncle fought for landing space on the stool and then zoomed out the window again as Dunca's screams startled them. The little cot holder cowered in the corner, skirts about her head, shrieking. In other words, a Karen. Mentally ordered the Browns to stop diving, told Auntie 1 and 2 and Uncle to stay in the window ledge, got Rocky and Diver to settle on the bedstead, while Savina calmed Dunca and led her from the corner. By the time the cot holder had been cajoled into watching Sylvina handle Lazybones, who'd let anyone caress him so long as it involved no effort on his part, Mentally realized that Dunca would never be comfortable in their presence, and that the woman disliked Mentally intensely for witnessing her fearfulness. For a long, sad moment, Mentally wished that she could have stayed at the weir where anyone or where everyone could accept fire lizards equably. She sighed softly to herself as she stroked Beauty, absently listening to Sylvina's reassurances to Dunca that the fire lizards wouldn't harm anyone, not her, not her charges, that Dunca'd be the envy of every other cot holder in Fort to have 9 fire lizards. 9? Dunca's protest came out of a terrified squeak, and she reached for her skirts to throw over her head. 9 of those beastly things flitting and diving about my home? They don't like to stay inside except at night, said Mentally, hoping to reassure Dunca. They're rarely all with me all at once. From the horrified and malicious look Dunca gave her, Mentally realized that she herself would be rarely with Dunca if the cot holder had anything to say in the matter. We can stop here no longer now, Mentally. You've to pick a guitar from the workshop, said Sylvina. If you need more rushes, Dunca, you've only to send your woman to the hall, she added as she motioned Mentally to precede her from the room. Mentally will be more closely involved with the hall than the other girls. She's to be back here at shutter time, same as others, or stay at the hall, said Dunca as Sylvina and Mentally went down the steps. She's strict with the girls, Sylvina remarked as they emerged onto the bright midday sun and started across the broad paved square. But that's to the good with all those lads vying for their attention. And take no heed of her grumbles over Petrion. She'd hoped to wed him after Merlan died. I'd say Petrion resigned as Fort Hold Harper as much to get free of Dunca as to clear the way for Robinson. He was so very proud that his son was elected Master Harper. Half Circle Seahold is a long way from Fort Hold. Sylvina chuckled, and one of the few places isolated enough to prevent Dunca from following him, child. As if Petrion would ever have taken another woman after Marilyn. She was the loveliest person, a voice of unusual beauty and range. Oh, I miss her still. More people were about, field workers coming in for their midday meal, a party of men on leggy runners, slowing to an amble through the crowd. An apprentice, intent on his errand, ran into Mentally. He was mouthing an apology when Beauty, peering through Menelly's hair, hissed at him. He yelped, ducked with an apprentice's well-developed instinct, and went pelting back the way he'd come. Sylvina laughed. I'd like to hear his tale when he gets back to his hall. Sylvina, I'm not a word, Mentally. I will not have you apologizing for your fire lizards, nor will Master Robinson. There will always be fools in the world like Dunca, fearful of anything new or strange. They had entered the archway of the Harper Hall. Through that door, across the stair hall, and you'll find the workshop. Master Gerant is in charge. He'll find you an instrument so you can play for Master Domic. He'll meet you there. With an encouraging pat and a smile, Sylvina left her. That is the end of chapter 2. And we are just at an hour, which is long enough. Chapter 3, the first word is speak. What?
Hello.
Really long chapters.
I finished it. It has 2 white stripes on it.
Oh. Oh, yes. Okay, the next chapter is 20 pages, so 22 pages. Here is Heavy D to say goodnight.
Okay. Hi. Now I'm at 18,000 steps for today. Yay! Because I can listen to it on my phone while I'm walking around downstairs and driving everybody crazy. So,
If I don't have to watch you walk, it doesn't drive me crazy.
Oh my God, this
Rebecca
is
says that's a really nice helmet. I'm gonna heart that because it is a really nice helmet. So, tomorrow night, same bad time, same bad channel. We're gonna shoot for doing this. We'll probably do a Rudyard Kipling. We've got a whole slew of soldiers here now. Here they are.
Yeah, I also made this one.
Okay. All right. So, and let's see, there was something else. So we'll continue with Daniel Stebbin and we'll read Rudyard Kipling probably. And there was something else I was going to say. Oh, yeah, I did post a YouTube link that relates to the Bible story that we read. So if anybody wants extra credit, you can watch the YouTube link. No, that one doesn't fit me. So you can watch the YouTube link and you get 100% extra credit off of the credit that you get for watching the video in the first place. So that is 0. So anyway, I hope that you all have a good night, and I hope to see you again tomorrow night, wherever you happen to be, and God bless you, and we'll see you then.
Good night.
Good night.